the Honorable, the Minister of Finance.
Madam Speaker, Nosiviwe Mapisa Ngakula, His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa, His Excellency the Deputy President Mr. David Mabuza, Cabinet colleagues, members of the Executive Committee for Finance, the Governor of the South African Reserve Bank, the Commissioner of the South African Revenue Services, Deputy President of the governing party, Honorable Mashatile, and leaders of all political parties and fellow South Africans. I'm honored to table the following documents before this House. The 2023 Division of Revenue Bill, the 2023 Appropriation Bill, the estimate of national expenditure, the 2023 budget review, the second adjustment appropriation bill, the ESCOM debt relief, and this budget speech. We're tabling the 2023 budget in a difficult domestic and global economic environment. The global recovery is slowing. Domestically, load shedding has become more persistent and prolonged, impacting on service delivery and threatening the survival of many businesses. This is compounded by the disruption to freight and logistic networks. Households are under pressure from rising cost of living, and unemployment remains stubbornly high. We are navigating this difficult environment with policies that support faster growth and address fiscal risks. Our pursuit of higher growth remains anchored on three pillars. Firstly, we are ensuring a stable macroeconomic environment to create a conducive environment for savings, investment, and growth. Secondly, we are implementing growth-enhancing reforms in key sectors, particularly in energy and transport. And thirdly, we're strengthening the capacity of the state to deliver quality public services, invest in infrastructure, and fight crime and corruption. In this budget, we are allocating additional resources towards these endeavors without compromising the sustainability of public finances. Since 2022 budget, global growth estimates for 2023 have been revised downward. The International Monetary Fund projects global growth to slow from an estimated 3.4% in 2022 to 2.9% in 2023. Global economic risks remain high, including those relating to the ongoing war in Ukraine, and could impede growth if they materialize. The reopening of the Chinese economy, however, may offer some reprieve by supporting a stronger rebound in global trade and demand. South Africa's economy grew by an estimated 2.5% in 2022. This is an upward revision from the 1.9% projection in the 2022 medium-term budget policy statement, reflecting a better than expected outcome in the third quarter of 2022. At 4.6 trillion, the size of the economy in 2022 was far bigger than the pre-pandemic levels in real terms. This is evidence of a robust economic recovery, even in the face of lingering COVID-19 scarring. However, the medium-term growth outlook has deteriorated. The real GDP growth is projected to average 1.4% from 2023 to 2025, compared with 1.6% estimated in October. Madam Speaker, in these conditions, government must maintain a prudent fiscal stance. The fiscal consolidation strategy we adopted several years ago has, one, restrained growth mainly in consumption expenditure, and two, allowed us to use part of higher than expected revenues to reduce the deficit. As a result, we're bringing the fiscal deficit down without resorting to tax increases or further cuts in social wage and infrastructure. A primary fiscal surplus will be achieved in the current financial year, and this will be maintained over the medium term. This is a critical policy stance. In addition, we must consider the consolidated position, which includes debt service cost. In this regard, the consolidated fiscal deficit is projected at 4.2% of GDP for 2022-23, and this will reach 3.2% in 2025-26. These figures include the impact of the partial takeover of Eskom debt, which I will elaborate on later. Mainly due to the Eskom debt relief, government debt will stabilize at a high level of 73.6% of GDP in 2025-26. This is 3 years later than anticipated in the 2022 medium-term budget policy statement. In general, government debt is high. The gross debt stock is projected to increase from 4.73 trillion in 2022-23 to 5.84 trillion in 2025-26. And because debt is high, our debt service costs are also high. Debt service costs are projected to average 366.8 billion annually over the medium term, reaching 397.1 billion in 2025-26. These are resources that could otherwise be used to address pressing social needs or to invest in our future. There are risks to the fiscal outlook. These include a worsening of the economic outlook, a further weakening of the finances of state-owned companies, and a possible unaffordable public service wage agreement. If these risks materialize, they will require us to make difficult budget trade-offs. For these reasons, we must continue exercising fiscal restraint. Accordingly, government non-interest spending will be kept below the level of revenue into the future, and will continue targeting the stabilization of debt. Madam Speaker, eradicating poverty, inequality, and unemployment is as urgent, if not more so, as it was at the dawn of our democracy nearly 30 years ago. A growing economy is key to achieve this objective. Implementing growth-enhancing reforms is a crucial element of our growth strategy. To fast-track the implementation of these reforms, we initiated Operation Vulindlela, a joint initiative of the Presidency and National Treasury to accelerate the implementation of structural reforms by fostering collaboration and coordination across the government, just over 2 years ago. Since its inception, Operation Vulindlela has made progress in fast-tracking reforms in priority areas of electricity, water, telecommunications, transport, and immigration. In water, the backlog of water license applications has been cleared, and new licenses now are being issued within 90 days. Later this year, we will table a law to establish an infrastructure agency to leverage the assets in the water sector for increased investment in water resources infrastructure. In digital communication, we will soon switch off the analog signal and finalize the migration to digital signal. This will unlock the benefits of the spectrum auction and unleash renewed investment in the sector. We are introducing new regulations to enable the accelerated rollout of telecommunications infrastructure. We are clearing the backlog in work visas application and are implementing the recommendations of the Skilled Immigration Review. Despite these gains, the challenges in electricity and logistics threaten to undermine the reform agenda. Madam Speaker, the lack of reliable electricity supply is the biggest economic constraint. Record levels of load shedding were experienced in 2022. I'm told 207 days of load shedding compared to 75 days in 2021. In response, we are acting decisively to bring additional capacity onto the grid. We are also working to transform the electricity sector to achieve energy security in the long term. As part of this, during the medium-term budget policy statement, we announced that the government will take over a portion of Eskom's debt. We are doing this for two reasons. Firstly, doing so will ease pressure on the company's balance sheet, enabling it to invest in transmission and distribution infrastructure. It will also allow Eskom to conduct maintenance required to improve the availability of electricity. Secondly, 337 billion of Eskom's debt is already government guaranteed. Explicitly taking on this debt will reduce fiscal risk and enhance long-term fiscal sustainability. We are proposing a total debt relief arrangement for Eskom of 254 billion rand. This consists of two components. One is 184 billion rand. This represents Eskom's full debt settlement requirements in 3 tranches over the medium term. Second is a direct takeover of up to 70 billion of Eskom's loan portion in 2025-26. Because of the structure of the debt relief, Eskom will not need further borrowing during this period. Government will finance the arrangements through the 66 billion baseline provision announced in the 2019 budget and 118 billion in additional borrowing over the next 3 years. Honourable members, the arrangement is accompanied by strict conditions to safeguard public funds. These conditions include, amongst others, requiring Eskom to prioritize capital expenditure in transmission and distribution during the debt relief period, and for the company to focus on maintenance of the existing generation fleet to improve availability of electricity. That the debt relief be used to settle debt and interest payment only, and that Eskom implement recommendations emanating from an independent assessment of its operations, which has been commissioned by the National Treasury. Details of the debt relief and the reasoning behind these conditions are set out in full in the online annexure, what is called W3. At the end of December 2022, municipalities owed Eskom 56.3 billion, and the debt is rising. Undertaking a debt relief for Eskom of this magnitude without addressing this particular risk would be counterproductive. We are working with Eskom to provide solution to this problem, wherein Eskom will provide incentivized relief to municipalities whose debt is unaffordable. However, the relief will come with conditions, and to avoid a repeat of debt built up over time, the relief will attach measures, including installation of prepaid meters to correct the underlying behavior of non-payment and underlying behavior of non-payment and operational practices in these municipalities. Eskom's long-term financial viability depends on its customers paying their dues. National Treasury will publish details for accessing the debt relief in a circular in March 2023. Implementation will start from the 1st of April. More generally, the culture of non-payment, not only by municipalities, but all organs of state and individual household customers, is concerning. Such a behavior undermines and cripples our institutions and makes it impossible for them to deliver services. To change this, the National Treasury is exploring ways to encourage all to improve their behavior and do the right thing. Madam Speaker, the energy and electricity sector here at home and globally is undergoing a rapid process of systematic change. Green technologies are becoming cheaper, and the deployment of low carbon solution is accelerating. We recognize that we have a role to play in encouraging adaptation and mitigation. I'm pleased to announce 2 tax measures to encourage businesses and individuals to invest in renewable energy and increase electricity generation. From the 1st of March 2023, businesses will be able to reduce their taxable income by 125% of the cost of investment in renewables. There will be no thresholds on the size of the projects that qualify, and the incentive will be available for 2 years to stimulate investment in the short term. As announced by the President, we will also introduce a new tax incentive for individuals to install rooftop solar panels to reduce pressure on the grid and help ease load shedding. Individuals who install rooftop solar panels from 1st of March 2023 will be able to claim a rebate of 25% of the cost of the panel, up to a maximum of 15,000. This can be used to reduce their tax liability in 2023-24 tax year. This incentive will be available for 1 year. Changes to the Bounce Back Loan Guarantee Scheme are also proposed to incentivize renewable energy, rooftop solars, and address energy-related constraints experienced by small and medium enterprises. Government will guarantee solar-related loans for small and medium enterprises on a 20% first loss basis. National Treasury will launch the Energy Bounce Back Scheme on the 1st of April. More broadly, part of addressing the persistent electricity supply shortage must involve implementing a just transition to low-carbon economy. Climate change poses considerable risks and constraints to sustainable economic growth in South Africa. We are among the most water-scarce countries in the world, and recent events have shown that extreme weather events such as floods, heat waves, and drought are occurring more often, and their intensity is worsening. Our Just Energy Transition Plan addresses these urgent climate changes. It aims to significantly lower emission of greenhouse gases and harnesses investment in new energy technologies, electric vehicles, and energy efficiency appliances. Most importantly, it ensures that communities tied to high-emitting energy industries are not left behind and are provided with the new skills and new economic and employment opportunities. Through the Just Energy Transition Investment Plan, launched by the President in 2022 at COP27, the country will make significant investment in our economy over the next 5 years, supported by a coherent industrial policy to enable innovation and economic diversification. International Partners Group of Developed Economies in 2021 pledged $8.5 billion to support South Africa's transition. This will go a long way. South Africa, through the role in G20, the IMF, and the World Bank, has stressed that developed nations could do more to support the energy transition of developing nations, especially by ensuring that the financial support included a much larger grant funding component. Infrastructure investment lays the foundation for inclusive and sustainable growth. They address supply-side constraints and expand access to basic services. Overall, the public sector is projected to spend 903 billion rand in infrastructure over the medium term. The largest portion of this, around 448 billion, will be spent by state-owned companies, public entities, and through public-private investment partnerships. These spending plans are mostly for strategic projects in the following sectors. Transport and logistics will spend an estimated 351.1 billion, including for Nsarang to improve the road infrastructure network. Water and sanitation is planned to spend 132.5 billion over the next 3 years, mainly by the water boards. As we undertake infrastructure projects, we need to crack down on criminality in the construction sector. The extortion and intimidation of lawfully appointed contractors and the workers they employ cannot be tolerated. Madam Speaker, allow me to highlight a few of shovel-ready projects approved through the budget facility for infrastructure. The 488-bed Limpopo Central Hospital will finally begin in construction in March this year. Phase 2 of the Welisizwe Rural Bridges program breaks ground in April this year. It plans to install 96 bridges annually to enable rural communities in the Eastern Cape, KwaZulu-Natal, Mpumalanga, Limpopo, Free State, and Northwest to safely access schools and workplaces. 308 billion rand is allocated for the program over the medium term. The Sol Plaatje municipality will repair aspects of the Riverton water supply scheme, which is the only water source and supply system to Kimberley. The construction of the enabling bulk infrastructure such as roads, water components for Lufereng mixed-use development in Gauteng begins in June 2023. It will support development of 31,000 mixed housing units. Access roads for the Mzimvu water project are nearing completion. The construction of the Ndabelanga Dam will begin this year. Additional funding during the next financial year may be required to ramp up implementation. Site establishment for the Kenwellium Dams project in Western Cape is completed. Early construction works include surface preparations are underway. Our focus is not only on building new infrastructure, but also on maintaining existing infrastructure. We do this to ensure that it lasts long and performs according to the required standard. At the same time, we're looking at initiatives to leverage private sector resources in public infrastructure delivery. This is to strengthen state capacity to expand infrastructure delivery and to catalyze private finances. Initiatives include funding development of continuous, investable, and transparent pipeline projects and programs, fast-tracking the implementation of the public-private partnerships regulatory framework recommendations, pilot the implementation of conditional grant pledging that will enable that we announced during the medium-term budget policy statement. It is aimed to ensure the rollout of infrastructure is not constrained by availability of funds, in particular if there is capacity to deliver. This is what some of the provinces are calling the front-loading. The Division of Revenue Bill is amended accordingly to give effect to that proposal. Interventions in supporting growth are critical to the health and sustainability of the economy. They need to be complemented by a policy environment that promotes the performance of productive sectors in an integrated way. This will require difficult but necessary trade-offs to ensure that the appropriate support is properly targeted at the correct products and value chain. Let me now turn to the revenue outlook and tax proposals. I know that's what gets people worried when I come to this term. Tax revenue collections for 2022-23 are expected to total 1.69 trillion. This exceeds the 2022 budget estimate by 93.7 billion. And the 2022 medium-term budget policy estimate by 10.3 billion. Over the medium-term revenue projections are 6 billion higher than the estimate of the 2022 medium-term budget policy statement. As a result, there are no major tax proposals in this budget. There are major tax proposals in this budget. I can see everybody is happy. The improvement in revenue is due to higher collection in corporate and personal income taxes and in custom duties. This is partially offset by the lower value-added tax estimate. Madam Speaker, our country is reaping the benefits of more efficient and effective tax administration. This formulation is not mine, it's plagiarism. It belongs to the commissioner. Always emphasize when we talk. Now we ask for tips. Nilesh Solanki from Gauteng was one of the nearly 2,000 South Africans that submitted a tip for the 2023 budget tips competition. He asked that we consider no increase in tax rates. Nilesh, you'll be happy to know that 2023-24 government will provide, instead of increasing, a tax relief of 13 billion rand. In addition to the tax measures I have announced to promote investment in renewable energy, the general fuel levy and the road accident fund levy will not be increased this year. Man, the generous, you don't clap again. To ease the impact on electricity crisis on food prices, the refund on the road accident fund levy for diesel used in manufacturing process, such as for generators, will be extended to manufacturers of foodstuffs. This will take place from the 1st of April 2023 for 2 years. The personal income tax bracket will be adjusted for inflation, which will increase the tax-free threshold. When I say it's adjusted for inflation, it doesn't mean I'm increasing it. It means I'm relieving people and moving higher up. The threshold for tax-free was 95,000. Now I'm increasing it. So even if you are bound 91,000, we are 95,000 now, you start getting taxed. Medical tax credit will also be increased by inflation to 364 per month for the first 2 members and to 246 per month for additional members. The retirement tax table for lump sum withdrawn before retirement and for lump sum withdrawn at the retirement will be adjusted upwards by 10%. This also a benefit. This means that tax-free amount that can be withdrawn at retirement increases to 550,000. The brackets of the transfer duty table will also be increased by 10%, allowing properties below 1.1 million to avoid any transfer duty payments. The research and development tax incentive will be extended for 10 years and will be refined to make it simpler and more effective. The urban development zone tax incentive will also be extended by 2 years to allow for the review of the incentive to be completed. After further consultation, the government intends to publish revised draft legislation on the two-port retirement system. This will include details on the amount that could be immediately available when the system is implemented from 1st of March 2024. Any withdrawals from the accessible saving point will be taxed as income in the year of withdrawal. And after a review and consultation last year, and taking into account the impact of the Upstream Petroleum Resource Development Bill, the minimum royalty rate for oil and gas companies will be increased to 2%. The maximum rate of 5% remains unchanged. Due to difficult operating environment for the sugar industry, from the impact of flooding, social unrest, the health promotion levy will remain unchanged for the following 2 fiscal years. To enable the industry to diversify, restructure, government proposes an increase in the excise duties of alcohol and tobacco of 4.9%, in line with the expected inflation. This means that a 340 milliliter can of beer increases by 10 cents. A 750 milliliter bottle of wine goes by 18 cents. A 750 milliliter bottle of spirits, Salimala. A 750 milliliter bottle of spirit will increase by 3.9. No sympathy for smokers. No sympathy for smokers. A 23-gram cigar, Bakala this side, will increase by R5.47. And on a pack of 20 cigarettes, the duty rises 98 cents. On illicit trade, over the past 3 years, SARS has taken several steps to enhance its effectiveness in combating illicit trade, particularly in tobacco. To this end, SARS has completed 2,316 seizures of cigarette and tobacco products to the value of 598.8 million. An additional 18 billion worth of schedules and assessment have been raised targeting syndicated tobacco-related crimes. Furthermore, SARS has collected more than 1.2 billion in revenue and handed over 92 cases for criminal proceeding with the NPA, of which resulted in successful conviction related to tobacco smuggling syndicates. Madam Speaker, let me come to the juicy part. Madam Speaker, the 2023 budget proposal reflects the government's priority by making targeted allocation for specific programs. Over the medium term, more than 60% of the non-interest spending goes to the social wage, while spending on buildings and other fixed structures such as roads and dams will increase from 62 billion in the current financial year to 104 billion in the medium term. We're increasing allocation to key frontline departments above existing baseline, moving towards a change in the composition of spending from consumption to investment, maintaining a large social security safety net while striving for sustainable levels of debt. This is not an austerity budget. It is a budget that makes tough trade-offs in the interest of the country's short and long-term prosperity. In 2023 budget allocation allocates additional funding totaling 227 billion rand over the medium term. There are several priorities that will be funded through this additional money. 66 billion is allocated to social development over the medium term, with 36 billion rand going to the COVID-related, SRD, at Takastat, Bati Ramaphosa. R36 billion is for SRD. 30 billion rand is used for inflation-linked increases for Ogogo. The old age and disability grant increases by 90 rand from the 1st of April, and a further 10 rand by the 1st of October. The result is a total increase to 2,090 by the end of October, what they will be earning. The child support grant rises from 480 to 510 from the 1st of October, while the foster care grant increases from 1,070 to 1,130 over the same period. 23 billion and 22 billion will be allocated to health and basic education respectively, to cover the shortfall in compensation budgets and to improve services. 8 billion is allocated for basic services through the local government equitable share. We have allocated 14 billion over the medium term to fight crime and corruption, with the following specific allocation. The South African Police Service is allocated 7.8 billion to appoint 5 police trainees per year over the next 3 years, which means a total of 15,000. The National Prosecuting Authority receives 1.3 billion to support the implementation of the recommendation of the State Capture Commission. And the Financial Action Task Force, the Financial Intelligence Centers allocated additional 265.3 million to tackle organized and financial crime. The Special Investigation Unit is allocated 100 million to initiate civil litigations in the Special Tribunal. Flowing from the proclamation linked to the recommendation of the State Capture Commission, discussions are taking place on funding for other departments, including Parliament, that need to implement these recommendations. I'm aware that Parliament has also revised this budget that we must take into account is the implementation of the State Capture Commission. That matter is being looked at. The Department of Defense is allocated an additional 3.1 billion rand to enhance security on the South African border. Finally, an injection, in the light of what I've said by the work SARS has got to do, an injection into the budget of SARS is proposed, in addition to a direct allocation for capital and ICT projects. Provisional allocations are set aside to improve revenue-raising capability of SARS. I'm also tabling the second adjustment appropriation bill for the 22-23 fiscal year. The bill proposes an allocation of 45.6 billion rand to provide for the carry-through cost of the 2022-23 public service wage increase. 1 billion is allocated to South African Airways to assist the carrier with the business rescue process closure. The South African Post Office is allocated 2.4 billion. The allocation for the state-owned companies will be accompanied by strict conditions to ensure sustainability, accountability, and transparency. If these conditions are not met, the unfortunate thing is that funds will not flow. Madam Speaker, the budget provides for carry-through costs, as I've indicated, of the 2022-23 wage increase. In addition, the budget includes pay progression, a housing allowance, and other benefits for civil servants. The budget also provides additional funding for safety and security, education and health. In health, the funds are to hire new staff, address the shortfall in the compensation budget, and retain additional health workers appointed during the pandemic, as well as to clear the backlog in health services. As for the wage negotiations that just commenced, the budget does not preempt the outcomes. It is an agreement between ourselves and the unions in the summit in March last year that they say if we put up a number before the negotiations, we're preempting the negotiation process. Our ideal view was that we should have concluded last year's negotiations by June, so that July last year we've commenced with 2023. Unfortunately, things did not work that way. So, nevertheless, this future wage negotiation must strike a balance between fair pay, fiscal sustainability, and the need for additional staff in the frontline services. An unbudgeted wage settlement will require very significant trade-offs in government spending because the wage bill consumes a significant portion of the budget. It will mean that funds must be clawed back in other ways. Mainly, this will mean restricting the ability of department entities to fill non-critical posts. It will also mean achieving cost savings from major rationalization of state entities and programs. As indicated by the President in the SONA, the National Treasury and the President, National Treasury has already identified where large savings can be achieved. In this regard, during the upcoming financial year, the National Treasury will work with the Presidency on concrete proposals to achieve savings by rationalization or closing public entities. Recommendations will be made to the President and Cabinet and should form part of the next budget. In relation to the recent floods and the national disaster declared in various provinces, let me just pause. Let me do that off-ramping because it's quite important here to explain, because there's a failure to understand and therefore a failure to respond. There are two components to a disaster. The first one is what is called an emergency relief. What are the emergency relief? Some people who need some food here, we need shelter here, we need medical attention there. That thing needs immediate response. Last year, we had 1 billion rand in 4 grants. That 1 billion was depleted, but during the adjustment estimate, we replenished that emergency grant, and we now have 695 million in that emergency grant. What that means, the people who are sitting in halls and other things must access this money so that they must get temporary accommodation, must get food, must get insurance. That's the first part. The second part of the disaster is what is called recovery and repair. To do that, you need skilled people than myself, more skilled than myself, who can go into a bridge and assess the cost to build that bridge. And then you submit a proper budget, and that is affected into the normal budget process. That's what we would appeal to the current provinces which are facing disaster. The money is available for immediate emergency relief. We must work together to make sure that communities are attended with speed. So a further 1 billion will be available next year for emergency relief. The emergency relief, as I've indicated, the emergency response also requires provinces and municipalities to reprioritize existing allocations to cater for immediate needs affecting communities, such as temporary shelter. I've done that, I've made reference. The contingency reserve will also be used to fund emergency responses, including as undertaken by the Defense Force. As it pertains to recovery and repair, I've also explained that, which relates to longer-term rehabilitation that will be factored into the normal budget process. So that is what we appeal should be done. Funding for this rehabilitation will also be done through the normal process. Move. South Africa has been a voluntary member of the Financial Action Task Force since 2003, which sets global standards to combat money laundering and the financing of terrorism. Across national borders, in 2021, FATF published its mutual evaluation report highlighting vulnerabilities in the country's anti-money laundering system. We have since made substantial progress to address these weaknesses. 2 laws have been enacted to address the technical deficiencies in the legislative framework, namely the General Laws Amendment Act of 2022, the Protection of Constitutional Democracy Against Terrorism and Related Activism Amendment Act. I must at this stage pause and thank the honorable members for the speed with which these pieces of legislation were processed. We thank all honorable members for the effort they've taken into that. Were it not for that speed, we probably be still struggling now in arguing our case in FATF. The laws address 15 of the 20 legislative deficiencies identified by FATF. The remaining 5 deficiencies will be addressed through regulation and practices that do not require legislation. We recognize the need to be more effective in implementing our laws, particularly in fighting organized and sophisticated crimes. Addressing the FATF issues is part of the broader fight against corruption, crime, state capture, and the deliberate weakening of the institutions of law and order in our country. The FATF plenary will make its decision later this week on whether or not to put South Africa under increased monitoring, otherwise known as grey listing. We should be prepared for that possibility. The 2023 budget increases allocation for all spheres of government to assist with urgent spending pressures. Relative to the 2022 budget, direct provincial allocations increased by 92.7 billion to 2.17 trillion over the medium term. The increase consists of 76.9 billion added to the provincial equitable share and 15.8 billion added to the direct conditional grants. Local government allocation will increase by a total of 14.3 billion, made up of 18.1 billion in local government equitable share and 6.2 billion in direct conditional grants. This takes the total direct allocation to local government to 522 billion rand over the same period. These allocations alleviate some of the financial pressures, particularly in health, education, and free basic service, where the cost of providing services are rising. Madam Speaker, our economy is facing significant risk. Uncertainty is on the rise. It requires us to be bold, to do bold things, to put the fear of failure aside and execute the difficult trade-offs needed to get from where we are now to where we want to be in the future. The measures in this budget reflect these realities and the need to act boldly. Madam Speaker, I'm grateful to the President and Deputy President for their support and the leadership. Thank you for the Deputy Minister of Finance and the National Treasury team led by the Acting Director General. My sincere thanks to the Commissioner of South African Revenue Services and the Governor of the South African Reserve Bank. Let me also thank my colleagues in the Ministers' Committee on Budget and the members of the Budget Council from the provinces who shared the load of tough decisions that have to be made. Similarly to the Parliamentary Committee of Finance and Appropriation, and I express my sincere appreciation. My gratitude also goes to Neil Bell from the Parliamentary Bills Office. He retires in May this year after 41 years of going the extra mile to support the passing and the tabling of the budget and other legislation in Parliament. Mr. Bell, we say a bells to you, and thousands of public servants who work behind the scenes to keep our country going. Let me thank each of you South Africans for the support. Sashe Yewani, we thank you. Nyazimba. Kumamchal. For the continued support under the difficult circumstances of managing the finances of this province. Yeah. So, thank you very much. That is your budget, Madam Speaker.